We're here tonight to discuss the memoir, More Light, An Artist's Life with Mayor Baba, written by Tom Riley. Tom, an accomplished artist and renowned storyteller, grew up in the legendary community of Woodstock. He learned of Mayor Baba in 1954 and was truly fortunate to spend incomparable time in Mayor Baba's divine company. Tom passed away in February 2022. Tom's wife, Cathy, a music teacher, singer, and songwriter, is with us this evening. She's joined by Janine Fallon Mower, genealogist and historian, and by Bruce Weber, author and historian. Now, a final note before we get started. Everyone's mic will be muted, and you can use the speaker view. There will be a Q&A at the end of the presentation, so please put your questions in the chat, and we will retrieve them from there. And a recording of tonight's program will be available on YouTube in a few weeks. The HSW YouTube channel is Historical Society of Woodstock, NA. And now, Janine, take it away.
Thank you, Louis. I appreciate you doing the introduction for us. Hello, everybody. And as Louis said, don't forget to, if you want your friends or if you want to see this again, it'll be on the YouTube channel in probably about 2 weeks, roughly. Bruce Weber's here, Cathy Riley's here. We're going to just have a little maybe sort of information and discussion about Tom's book, More Light and Life with Mayor Baba. And Cathy also has a slideshow that she's going to present. And I wanted to let everybody know that I put in the chat where the books are going to be available through her, or also she's going to be at the Golden Notebook on May 6th at 2 o'clock. They have their book signings up at Nancy's Artisanal up at the Bearsville Center. So if you're in town, you can come and meet her and, visit with her and listen to probably a little bit of a different presentation. Because tonight we're going to present somewhat of we're going to take a few moments just to reflect on Tom Riley, his book, More Life, and the Woodstock influence, how Woodstock influenced Tom and his art. And also how my meeting Tom and Cathy added to the historical record. And Cathy, I think you just jump in when you want, but I think you would agree that it was serendipitous that we met. We met because you and Tom were looking for photographs, and you wanted to use in the book. And so somehow you ended up in my email inbox, the two of you. And we had a few conversations and helped in any way that we could. But what you didn't know is that I, as a researcher, historian, have a passion about my ancestry from Ireland, and then the Irish immigrants in Kingston and in Ulster County, and also in Woodstock. And so you wouldn't have known that when you contacted me, that I was very interested in the family groups at Lewis Hollow. And because of meeting you two, I'm able to help broaden the story. Usually the story that we tell about the Irish and Lewis Hollow is that they all got drunk and came down on election day and gave the Republicans of Woodstock a hard time. So so now we can broaden that a little bit. Thanks to you and thanks to Tom being in here.
Thanks to you.
Oh, well, I know. Well, it's an ongoing process, So again, if people have questions, don't forget, just drop them in the chat and we'll catch them at the end of the slideshow. And so I just wanted to let you know what Tom and Cathy helped us as historians about Woodstock learn is that we now know for sure that a man named Ian Lewis came to America in the mid 1800s, and he had the good fortune to make a very good living for himself selling ceramics and glassware that were made in Ireland and imported to New York City. And at the time of the Great Famine, which is the 1840s, 1850s, he felt moved or called to help his fellow countrymen who were coming to America to have a job when they got here. And so it was coincidentally, is there any such thing as a coincidence that bluestone was becoming the main thing that was used for flagging and for sidewalks and things throughout the Eastern Seaboard? And Ian Lewis purchased 800 acres on the face of our overlook mountain, that mountain that we all share. Richard has a picture of that as his Historical Society face there. So Tom was very, very sure that his father's grandfather, Seamus Riley, was a recipient of that extraordinary generosity of Ian Lewis. And this is something we didn't know for sure, but Tom's great-grandfather and a few other Irishmen discovered what they call and what we know as California quarry. So for me, and I don't know how Richard feels about this, but that was only, sort of in passing from Bill West, because we would say to everybody, how did it get the name California quarry? And Bill West said, well, maybe it was because, but Tom Riley said, definitely it was because it was founded just after the California Gold Rush. So that makes sense to me. So it's kind of exciting to have that kind of nailed down. Mm-hmm. So Cathy, just to go briefly through a little bit about Tom's early years in Woodstock. And what I did as I read the book, I was struck by the relationship that Tom was slowly developing with a greater power, if you will. What would they say in AA? The higher power, if you will, the higher spirit. And I was struck by, I guess in 1938, when the family was living in Sauk Hill, which happens to be another Irish village in Ulster County. He shared his experiences about attending Mass at St. Anne's Church down in Sauk Hill. And he writes about his experience as a 7-year-old being fascinated with the Jesus Christ, while he very cleverly writes his story about how he would avoid going to Mass. So I think everybody would find that very interesting when they read the book. He probably told you the story many times, right, Cathy?
Yeah, I mean, he would feign illness so that he wouldn't have to go to Mass, but then he would create his own little altars and have his own little ceremony and open the New Testament and try with his 7-year-old self to read from the New Testament while his parents were off at church.
Yeah, I as I was reading that, I was really trying to, picture a 7-year-old child doing that. The whole thing was fascinating. And he wrote, and I thought I could picture this because I was a daydreamer in school too. But I wasn't daydreaming about Jesus. I can assure you of that. But he's sitting in the one-room schoolhouse that still is on the Sauk Hill Road, and he's looking up at St. Anne's Church. And if you'll tell us, what did Tom share that his teacher did?
Yes, yep. He would look out the window and he was so beset with his love for Jesus. It consumed his 6 and 7-year-old mind so much that he would sit while he was supposed to be studying, look out the window. It's now a Kingston Town Hall, that building, the Sawkill Creek off to the edge of the pasture there. And he would see Jesus waving at him and beckoning him to come join him at the bank of the Sawkill Creek. And poor Thomas wasn't studying. And Miss Ruby Cure, I always called her, had the daunting job of, in a one-room schoolhouse teaching all 8 grades. Can you imagine? Oh, my dear. So I feel for her too. But the end of the story is that Tom would say that he would be loudly reprimanded by Miss Ruby, who would say, "Thomas, you're not paying attention to your studies. Now go stand in the corner." Mm-hmm. And he would go quietly to the corner, and then she'd put a big dunce cap on his head.
It's, a far cry from what we're used to today. So it's really, it's impressive to read how he recounts that. So Tom's real introduction to Woodstock and art is the way he wrote it, I found fascinating. So now it's around 1941, as far as I can tell, and the family has moved back to Woodstock. Mm-hmm. And Tom is now attending another one-room school, which is located behind where our CVS is now. And he very eloquently writes that he knows immediately that he's among a group of children who would, for him, then be kindred spirits. And I was struck by that. he knew that they were also interested in self-expression, self-discovery, and fulfillment. And he's writing about being in classroom with children of artists in Woodstock. But another pivotal thing that I was really struck by was the teacher in this era, Mrs. Quick in the Woodstock School, took the students on a field trip to the Woodstock Artists Association. So for me, that kind of gives you the sense of the aura. You know, people were really involved with the artists, the arts, and that whole community of what am I trying to think of? Creativity that was going on in Woodstock. And so this, for him, he writes this, that it was another awakening for him as far as knowing that he had some innate need to do art, which was closely followed by his brother Harold giving him classical music albums as a gift. And so that was a another lifelong love that he had, classical music.
Yeah, it's so interesting that his, older brother Harold and Bill, sensing his interest in music and art, were very supportive and bringing him these records and giving him books that he would draw and copy from. And he felt so fortunate that the community of Woodstock, with this tremendous art colony, was just so fulfilling after the little sleepy town of Sawkill. Now he would go into a house and a group of people would be playing, chamber music or, singing Schubert Lieder. It just was something that just opened his heart in a way that he felt so fortunate to have that exposure.
Yeah, he made quite a leap. I could just imagine, I guess. So Harold and William were almost 15 years older than he was. So there was this whole generational difference that was going on in the family dynamic there for them. But Harold also introduced him to John Clark Ridpath, an 19th century American historian who had written a book, and this is where Tom started to draw on his own. He was self-taught as far as his drawings went at that point. So, but the other thing that he also wrote about, which then leads into the next part of his life, is that he felt very, very sure that he was experiencing visions of reincarnation when he was in his mid-teens, right? That was sort of another, you can see as he writes the step-by-step how he's developing this interest.
Yeah, I think many of us could relate to that feeling that in taking rides in his, I guess 12, 13, 14, and going with his parents driving, he would sort of feel this familiarity, almost like you have mentioned deja vu, like I've been here before.
Right.
There's a feeling of familiarity that where did that come from? And he started feeling that these may have been remembrances for some former lifetime, not just something from this time. And again, his brother Bill gave him a book of 6 systems of Indian philosophy when he was about 15 or 16, and sensitively felt his interest in that realm.
Yeah, that was, I think, for an older brother to look at a teenage boy and sense that those kind of things were going on. I found that was very touching for a sibling to be able to do that. And so then now we're in 1947, so we're post World War II era, and then brother Bill facilitates Tom's meeting with Walter Goltz. And then really the whole art interest really kicks into high gear. I think the spiritual side kicked a little higher up a level when Tom had the elective class on study of comparative religions, right?
Yeah, yes.
So yeah, so for all of you that are joining with us here is Tom writes wonderfully. This book is really amazing. Sorry about that. Wonderfully written. And so he does document how his changes occur, which I felt was fascinating the way he did that. So as we lead into the slideshow that we're going to present with Cathy and Bruce, Tom then just basically went on to art school. He went to the Tyler School of Art, which is part of Temple University. And then he ended up his educational career in the new school in Greenwich Village, which was influenced greatly by his sister and her husband.
And yeah, and Peter, his brother-in-law, went to the new school and recommended it to Tom, who then did post, studies after finishing college at the new school.
At the new school, which we all, are really very familiar with. So I think we'll just close with the thought on my part of this show here is with Tom. So now we know how he's gotten to be. He's in college and he gets a summer job, right? And he goes and he helps. It's Raul Vidas. Am I saying that correctly?
Yes.
Who are he's a virtuoso violinist at one point in his life, and they're packing up their Woodstock house and they need someone to help pack. And so Tom is here just randomly stuffing boxes full of books. And what falls out of a book?
Yes, and just as he's been hired to help pack this summer home, the Raoul's and his mother were there. The father had passed, and they had about 10 years before, they hadn't had the heart to come back to Woodstock from California to close the house down, and they finally did. In packing the library, all at once at the top of a stack of books, there was this beautiful face. Tom asked Raoul, the violinist, who was this amazing looking man, and it turned out it was a picture of Meher Baba, and it turns out that Raoul actually had met Meher Baba in 1932 in Hollywood, when Meher Baba actually went to exhort the movie industry to make films with spiritual themes and to use their art to elevate instead of, denigrate society. And at that time, Raoul was writing movie music in Hollywood and was invited to Douglas Fairbanks and Mary Pickford's home, where Meher Baba was giving a beautiful speech about using film toward elevating humanity. And so subsequently, Tom asked Raoul about Meher Baba because he had become interested in Indian philosophy, and that was, I guess, the beginning of his spiritual journey.
I think it sounds like it led up to the next adventure, which all of you will learn about through the book, I think is basically it. And I found it all fascinating. So I think we can touch base with Richard and see if he's available. I think he is. I just sent him a text. So we have a slide presentation that Cathy's going to lead. And Bruce, I think if I'm correct, you're going to pop in when we get to one part of it at that time, right?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so let's just, don't forget you can put any questions in the chat. I think Richard is getting ready to do the slideshow. In the meantime, if anybody has any questions, we can entertain them now. If you have any, oh, here we go. Nope. Richard's on. Thank you.
Next, many of you know this wonderful artistic map of Woodstock, which we were able to get a copy of, showing many of the places that Tom lived in or went to, and it's just a beautiful artistic rendering of the art of Woodstock that we used in Tom's book. Next. This is the photo we took when we were in Woodstock in 2020 Tom standing next to the historical marker, pointing toward the mountain where his forefathers actually found that bluestone sediment that became known as the California Quarry. Next. This is the one-room schoolhouse that's now the Kingston Town Hall in Sawkill, where Tom attended school and would see Jesus waving to him from the creek nearby. Next. I think this would be a wonderful place for you to come join us, Bruce, and talk about golds.
Sure. So I decided to work on Walter Goltz, and one of the things I had to find, even though he was a very significant and long-living artist in Woodstock, there was virtually nothing published about him. In that dark period that we all lived through in 2020, I ended up finding his family. He was from Buffalo originally, and I found some family. But I also found Tom Riley. And I found Tom Riley because a painting that Goltz had done on the back of it mentioned that it was once owned by a student of Goltz named Tom Riley. And I found Tom Riley. And Tom, of course, was with us then and very valuably shared his experiences with Goltz. He studied with Goltz in summer of 1946 and 1947, when he was really devoted to landscape painting and decided that this was something he wanted to do. And Goltz had come to Woodstock very early in the first years of the 20th century to study with Burge Harrison, and he worked very closely with John Colson. Was an instrumental figure, a key figure in the Art Students League's presence, and also taught along with John Colson after Colson began his own school in the early 20s, and then had his own school. This was late in Goltz's life, but one of the amazing things about Woodstock, and I had a conversation this morning with a person named Bill Arnold. Bill Arnold's father was Grant Arnold, who was a printmaker who worked here in the 30s. And Bill was telling me about the artists that he knew as a young man in Woodstock. And Tom shared that with me too, because he had an opportunity to not only work with Goltz, but he had an opportunity to work with other people and really opened his eyes to plein air painting, to working outdoors, and passed along the method that had come down through all those decades of the Art Students League and later decades in Woodstock, when landscape was a prominent, if not the most prominent, form of painting in the colony. We could show a couple of Goltz paintings here. Can I move?
I would, Bruce, if I could say just a quick,
Sure.
my experience of that was one of the high points of the creation of this book, because at that time when you called asking if Tom knew anything about Goltz, you were preparing a blog and hadn't found much material. We at that same time had been looking for a good image of Goltz online and through the Woodstock Historical Society, and just couldn't find anything at all really with any merit. And when I heard Tom answer the phone and said, yes, I studied with Walter Goltz, I just rushed to the other phone, and just the wonderful outcome was that you were able to give us access to the family who had given you permission to use that beautiful self-portrait. So I've been so appreciative.
Right. I mean, it's funny. An artist like Goltz, who had, like I said, had such a presence in Woodstock, there was almost nothing known about him. Every little bit helped, and certainly Tom's memory and experience with him helped a lot and tied a number of the streams together. And that was one of the things. I didn't have an image of what Goltz looked like. Mm-hmm. Although there is a photograph of him on Ever's great book about Woodstock. Mm-hmm. If one has the cover, the paperback cover, or the image of sitting there with a student in Woodstock. but you still couldn't make out his features as clearly as you do in the self-portrait.
Hmm. Yeah, fabulous.
I just want to mention about the book. The book's it's a wonderful book. It combines various things. I was also, interested and intrigued by the story about the Irish settlement and the quarry area and California quarry. I didn't know that much detail. I wanted to learn more, and there are various aspects that I had not seen in other histories that were in the book. And I think it's valuable for anyone interested in Woodstock history, and certainly also in Meya Baba.
Yes. I mean, your Historical Society, I have to just say thank you so much to all of you who have been so fabulously helpful to us and creating this, it just is it's been a wonderful collaboration. This is one of Goltz's paintings. Do we know what year this was, Bruce?
It's funny, I don't see it anymore on my screen.
Yeah.
I
So
don't know. I don't know I think I know which painting it is. I think it's a painting of 1926. Is that correct?
I think so.
Yeah, I just can't see it. But that's a very important painting by Goltz that I
Yeah.
tracked down. He won an award for it in Philadelphia, bronze medal at the Philadelphia Sesquicentennial exhibition.
Yeah. Is the next one also a Goltz? I think we added
Yeah, I don't know which one that is. Is that the one that Tom owned?
I'm not sure. Somebody maybe in the family owns this. I'm not quite sure.
Yeah.
But I can see
I know that-
Tom's
yeah,
early
that-
style.
This would have been about the time that Tom was studying with him.
Hmm.
Artists go through changes, and Goltz's art, even from the when you saw before compared to this, he got much freer in his painting, working
Mhm.
outdoors. Brushstroke became freer. And it's so fascinating when you look at these, because these artists, a lot of them lived right around the center of town, and they crept around that town and they painted it from all sorts of angles.
Hmm.
That early landscape group. And Goltz was like that. And of course, Goltz's home is the home today of the Historical Society of Woodstock. And where we have exhibitions there was his studio.
I'm trying to remember, is this a Goltz painting or is this a
And no,
Tom
it is.
painting?
No, it's Goltz.
That's Goltz. Okay. Yeah. And is the next one also, can you just see can we see the next? I'm trying to remember what the next slide is, the next.
Next slide is the Jesus slide.
Those are Tom's work then, right?
Okay. So this really, I can see Tom's being influenced by Goltz in some of his very earliest paintings when he would go out with Goltz and paint en plein air.
Sure.
So next slide, please. So in 1946, 47, when Tom was about 16 or 17, his older brother Bill took him to meet Goltz and brought some of Tom's early works. This is an etching of Jesus, and the next one is if you could go to the next slide, please, is a pencil drawing of Judas. And I'm not sure if these were drawings that were brought, but Goltz saw some of his early artwork and was very impressed and took Tom on as his only student because he was retired. So this was such a boon for Tom to work with Goltz just one-on-one. Next slide. So this and the next slide are two of Tom's earliest landscape paintings working with Goltz en plein air. So, could you show the next slide, please? Thank you. You can actually, I think, see Goltz's influence here. And next slide, please. This is actually, you can see it's the painting that's right above me here on the living room wall. And Tom said that when they went out to work on this painting that Goltz actually sketched in charcoal the outline of the buildings and the trees, and then Tom filled in. And Tom was maybe 18 when he did this. I think this is looking toward the Woodstock Library at that time?
Yeah, it's hard to see, but I don't know.
Okay. And the next one, I think, is also if you could go to, is again a slightly later painting when Tom was in his probably 17, 18, 19 in that. And I think he did say that the library was in the background and the parts of the overlook were in the background.
Mhm.
On we go. Next slide, please. As everyone here knows, I'm sure, this is Ralph Radcliffe Whitehead, who came from England and after searching throughout America with some friends found the farm community of Woodstock. And of course, his influence upon Tom's life and many other artists' lives has been phenomenal and tremendous. And Bruce, I'm sure you might want to say, or Janine, something about Whitehead, I'm sure.
Well, I mean, Birdcliff was founded in 1902, and it's still surviving and it's doing very well. Whitehead lived in Woodstock till 1929. His wife, his widow, and his son, and ran it for years and years. And you know, it's on overlook. It's on the mountainside, so and it remains there. I don't know what Tom's involvement was with Birdcliff, though. I don't know if he had any strong connection with it. You?
No, I don't know, but I know that isn't Matt, I think Matt is here and he was very involved with Birdcliff. I don't know if he's
Well,
willing.
Tom doesn't write as though he was involved in Birdcliff.
No, I don't think he
writes it
was.
as a history, the way I saw it. He
Right.
wrote a little bit more about the Woodstock Artists Association part of his
Yes.
life, but
hmm
but I think he's probably, certainly expressing his opinion that it was a good thing for Woodstock to have Birdcliff here because that's how the artists came. I think he was in that position to say that. So
Right, and the teacher, the main teacher, Birch Harrison, was the second painter of teaching at Birdcliff. He taught 1 year, took a year sabbatical, and then he got hired when the Art Students League moved from Old Lyme, Connecticut, their summer school to Woodstock, and so that's how Birch Harrison, and then of course through the Art Students League is how the landscape tradition began, how Goltz came here. So it all connects back to those early days when Whitehead brought Harrison here to teach.
And, Tom had more connection with Peter Whitehead, the son of Ralph Radcliffe Whitehead. So that is, has a wonderful story that we'll share a little later. So let's see, on we go to the next slide, please.
Is the next slide the video?
Let's see, it might be. So I think so. We did we did.
My
Yeah, here we go. Yeah.
early past was experienced in Woodstock, New York. It was an extraordinary village filled with artists from various parts of the world and artists of many, many descriptions.
In Tom's middle teen years, his older brother brought him to meet.
It was in Woodstock.
Yes, in Woodstock when he was a middle teen, his older brother brought him to meet.
I happened to be acquainted with a retired artist named Walter Goltz. Goltz he was from a German background, but he was born in Buffalo, New York, And early on in his life, he began to study the art of painting. And when he had become quite well known, he situated himself in Woodstock as a place to live, where he remained for the rest of his life. And my brother, by chance, happened to become acquainted with him. My brother, William.
And took Tom and some of your drawings to
Gold,
Gold's.
when I met him, was in his later 70s, and took me on as his early student. I was at the time about 16 or 17, and it fascinated me, and I was totally involved in the process of learning how to paint.
It was so lucky that he was retired and took you on as his only student.
Because I would paint next to him outside in the landscape near his home, which was located not far from the very middle of town. Here are some of the very, very early of my first paintings. Two of them are reproduced here.
So you would be en plein air,
essentially
outside
of Golds's house, which was in the village itself. And this is about 2 years later. At that time, I was perhaps 17 or 18 years old. This is a much larger painting, an oil painting on canvas, probably 25 by 30 inches.
I love your description of how this was created. Would you share that about how Golds began sketching?
Yes, he I set myself up outside the home on a field next to the house, and Golds took some simple painting brushes or artistic brushes and mixed the pigments with a very thin medium, say turpentine and pigment, and just sketched the image, the trees, not the fulfillment, but just the basic drawing, and told me to fulfill the color from what I observed in the landscape, and this is what manifested.
Mhm.
That photograph is a high school graduation photograph. Here's another painting near Golds's house, the Woodstock Library, near the heart of town. And behind those trees is the face of various parts of the Overlook Mountain.
I love the way you have described in your book how Golds would guide you, but if you felt the need to improvise or express your own style, he was very supportive of your approach in taking your own direction.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the photos.
He was a treasure to study with. because it was a process of discovery and fulfillment.
So moving on to a later, much later work, I thought it, could we go back to that one before,
No,
Richard? Okay.
sorry.
Okay, so this is the first house that Tom and Yvonne built. Tom's first wife, Yvonne, and Tom built in the Maverick, taking books out of the library and teaching themselves how to build a house. At first, not even having electricity and hand saws, that Tom said that his friend, the Nears, one of his friends, Andre Near, his father had I think it was a lumber company, and sharpen the saws when they became, you know, dulled from all the work that Yvonne and Tom did building this house, which still stands today. And Janine, I think, was telling me who owns the house now. So next photo, please. And the interesting story in the book that was fascinating when Tom actually took me here in Stone Ridge at Ridgely Manor, the home of the Leggett family. There's an interesting story about Peter Whitehead, the son of Ralph Radcliffe Whitehead, asking Tom to help Mrs. Leggett bring a car back to Ridgely Manor, and Mrs. Leggett so happily sitting Tom down and saying that Peter had told her, Mrs. Leggett said to Tom, that, she had heard that he was devoted to Meher Baba. Did he know that the great Indian mystic Vivekananda had actually been in America and come and stayed here in Stone Ridge, what is it, 14 miles from Woodstock? And Mrs. Leggett, if you could show the next slide, showed this beautiful home, and then this is Mrs. Leggett's mother in the dress with the square bodice, with Vivekananda to the left and some of his monks there in Stone Ridge in the 1890s. And this was particularly interesting to Tom, who had been drawn to Vivekananda and Ramakrishna. So friend Kristen is saying this is on Leggett Road. Many of you probably know that area and the Ridgely Manor. So the next slide is and I'm sure many of you have been by this, the Winchell's Corner Store, which Tom and his wife Yvonne purchased in 1966 and renovated. And, I'd say, 4 years, 5 years there. This one of the stories that is most enjoyed in our Meher Baba community is that in the let's see, at the end of 1968, two people came into the antique shop while Tom was working there and had a interesting conversation. Tom had a poster of Meher Baba on the wall, and an Englishman who was brought in who was, had come into the antique shop, was talking all about how he was so happily interested in Meher Baba and had read this book and that book. And they had a long conversation about Meher Baba. And when he left, Tom found out to his surprise a week later that it was none other than George Harrison, who had come into Winchell's store to his antique shop and had a long conversation with him about Meher Baba. And Tom had no idea that he was a famous Beatle because he was a classical, he was a
He came in
classical
with he brought Garth Hudson of the band brought him into the store.
Right, right. Garth used to frequent, yes, thank you, Bruce. Garth used to frequent Winchell's, the antique store, and because he always loved to find musical memorabilia. And one day Garth brought this Englishman in, and Garth went off hunting for some wonderful antique to buy. And the Englishman proceeded to have a long conversation with Tom. And then the Englishman said how happy he was to have had this wonderful time talking about Meher Baba, and gave Tom a nice embrace and left. And a week later, Garth Hudson came back and said, "How did you like George?" Tom said, "George?" And Garth had to tell him that it was George Harrison. And Tom mentions in his book that he was such a lover of classical music. He had heard about the Beatles, but he was probably one of the few people in the world who didn't know who George Harrison was. So next slide. When we came back to the area in 2020, I was happily able to take the photo of Tom in the Maverick at the first house that he and Yvonne built. And then they sold Winchell's and bought land on John Joy Road and created a whole subdivision, working very hard together, and called it Meher Circle, which is there to this day. So I got a picture of Tom in front of the first house they built in that subdivision. They were there from 1970 to 1975. Next slide, please. Years later, this is in the 2000s when Tom and I moved to Asheville for 20 years, and he set up a studio. So he's hopefully creating another masterpiece. And the next slide is, please. And I thought it would be interesting to show some of his paintings. So this shows Tom's love of the sea. He went to sea as a young man and had many adventures. So here's an ocean scene. And the next one is I don't really know where this is, but it looks very pastoral. I always feel like many of these could have been from photos that he saw in Ireland. But the horses aren't telling us if they're American or Irish. I don't know. Next. To me, this feels like an Irish scene. It looks like an Irish keep in the background, like one of those derelict old tower buildings. A dramatic Irish day. Next. Next. I know Tom has said that this is the Bay of Kenmare in the south of Ireland. He loved to paint Ireland. It was one of his favorite subjects to paint, places to paint. So next, please. And here we have his favorite person, Meher Baba, in an Irish landscape. Next. Next. Those cliffs to me look a little bit like they might be, the western part of Ireland, maybe near the cliffs of Mower. They have an Irish feeling to them.
Kathy, do you know the time period that these pieces of work were created?
You know, I would actually, yeah, I would think that this was not, they are listed on the back of the paintings, but I don't have them with me now, but I would think this would probably be in the, um, probably this 70s or the 80s.
Okay, thank you.
Next, this is one of the most, I guess I'd say, impressionistic of Tom's paintings. And what does that say? Does that say 83? I'm not quite sure. Or 03. Yeah, that says 03. Next. This is one of Tom's, he did a few sort of almost Russian iconographic paintings. And of course, Meher Baba blessing an aspirant with the, yeah, so I'd say, yeah, this is from the 60s. Thank you. This is from the 60s. And there we are, the, the devoted ones coming through the rough ocean of life as the master is blessing our onward journey. Next, Tom painted this looking out of his maverick home that he and Yvonne built, looking up the wooded and snowy hillside one winter, imagining that he was following Meher Baba up the hill through the snow. Next. And this is definitely Meher Baba off the cliffs of Mower in the background. And Tom has often said that he is the last young man just managing to scramble aboard. Mhm. And I think, is that the last slide, Richard? I'm not sure.
Yes, it is.
Oh,
Coming
good.
back.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. And it's wonderful to see them again.
Yeah, that was fantastic. Thank you. It's a great they tell a story in their own right, the artwork itself. So
Mm-hmm.
Bruce, any artistic comments for us at all?
No, no, really. I think we really had a nice view of Tom's career as an artist. And all those Irish paintings, they look very nice.
Mm-hmm.
And Kathy, I was trying to remember, and I couldn't find it in the book while you were talking, but there's a comment that Tom made about how Meher Baba influenced him and told him to continue to paint or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a story that, well, I would say that when Tom and his first wife Yvonne met Meher Baba in Myrtle Beach in 1958, Baba said something that influenced him greatly. I thought maybe I would read a little bit that he wrote at the end of the book, just a snippet from Meher Baba and Art.
Yes, okay. Yeah, that's might be what I was thinking of. Yeah.
Yes, okay. So Tom says, I see art as a process of linking one's energy to the divine. It is an attempt at freeing or liberating the sacred within oneself. The practice of art helps in developing a deeper relationship between the lover and the divine beloved. When I was quite young, I began studying with the elderly painter Walter Goltz in Woodstock. What he taught me led to a reality within myself and beyond the third dimension. He opened a new direction, inspiring me to yearn for fulfillment. Later, Meher Baba clarified this when he said to me, quote, art in the West is a process toward the realization of the sacred within, close quote. Art is a pathway toward this discovery and can link us to the essence of what we truly are. It assists in the discovery of God's presence. The essence of what we are is oneness. Art is a language, a doorway to this oneness.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of. Thank you for finding that. Yeah. Well, if anybody has any questions, you want to pop them in the chat there and we can do our best to answer them, or any thoughts. Again, Cathy's going to be here on, it's May 6th. I almost said March 6th. My God, May 6th. And the book talk will be at Nancy's Artisanal, which is in Bearsville at the Bearsville Center. And if you go all the way back to the top of the chat, there's I did put Bruce's blog in here too. So there's a link to his, where did that go? What's the name of your blog again, Bruce? It's
Learning Woodstock Art Colony.
yes, and it's fascinating. It's a great blog. It's Bruce is doing us a great service, the whole community of artists, by putting that blog together. But the Cathy has the lifeo'reillybooks.com, and is it sherryanbooks.org?
Sherry R. Books.
Sherry R.
Yeah, I do have to say, Bruce, that Tom was so fascinated by your blogs, the part 1 and 2 about Goltz. I mean, it was so fulfilling to him. So I just wanted to take a moment to thank you for that.
That's why I'm doing it.
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah, it really is. I don't know, I just feel like it's been a wonderful collaboration with the Historic Society, and I hear that you're expanding soon. You're going to be maybe building a new
Well,
addition.
yes, thank you. We're working our way through the process of permissions in Woodstock. So one step at a time, but we have a dream. So we have a dream about an archive building that will bring our little organization into the 21st and 2nd century. So, but yes, thank you for mentioning that. We're slowly working our way through the process. So you can always check out our blog, Historical Society of Woodstock.org. Everything that we're doing is on the blog, and we have a lot going on. We've got an amazing season full of exhibits that are something for every interest in town you could possibly want. And we have a fundraiser coming up next Saturday, actually on April 8th at 7 p.m. at the community center, and it's featuring Mark Black and Rennie Cantine. So if people are around and you want to visit that, you can get the information about that on the blog. So I don't see too many questions popping in there, so I think we're doing good. I really appreciate everybody stopping by and sitting in on this. And if you do want to see it again, it'll be on YouTube in about 2 weeks. We'll have that, we'll put that information on our social media. So if you follow us on Instagram or Facebook, that, we usually pop that out there with the link to the Zoom when they're up. So Richard, any last words?
No, I would also add that if you want to receive our e-blasts, go to the website historicalsocietywoodstock.org, and you
How
can
come I can't get it?
put your email in there, and you'll get our e-blasts.
This to go to them.
You just hit enter.
I don't know what that is. Sorry about that.
It's there.
Okay.
Okay.
Somebody else,
Yeah.
Okay. So it looks like Carolyn Riley was interested in having the scene identifying the Woodstock location as the date. I guess they're probably on the back of the painting. Is that right, Cathy?
Some are, mostly the older ones are, if they're landscapes, they're not titled. Yeah, so that has been a bit of a problem, I know, with some of the paintings, trying to figure out where they are, some of those earlier paintings of Tom's.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, Bruce, you would have, people sometimes just didn't identify where they were.
Or they made things up.
Right. Maybe they just didn't want to, or they made it up, right? Yeah, like we're all doing with our
But-
pictures these days, right? Yeah,
Isn't it possible, Janine, can you hear me?
I can.
Instead of chat? I guess I feel that there are people still around who can identify those places in Woodstock, those scenes.
Well, I mean, I think then as we get these paintings out through the book, maybe people will come forward with that. It's very possible, but I would leave that up to Bruce, who knows best on how that happens.
It's hard, it's a lot of hard work, but you sometimes can, but sometimes you can't. Remember when in those early days, not so much in the 40s, but in those early decades, Woodstock was pretty clear cut. There weren't a lot of trees around. If you look at those early paintings, you don't see a lot of trees. So that's made it more difficult, the way we look at the town now and the way people lived in it.
Yeah. I guess I wonder, particularly in this day of so much, digital, that even in the museum for the Historical Society, you couldn't have them posted with a request. Add information. Tell us.
That may happen. That may happen in the future. It's a great suggestion. And I was just noting that Christina mentioned there's a lot about Tom's life in the book, I think, and we tried, just to respond to Christina's question, we didn't want to tell the whole book. It's sort of is a lot in there that we left out in this little chat we had here today. So. But Tom did an amazing job of relaying life in the era of the 50s and 60s and early 70s in Woodstock in his writing. So, so I think
just wanted to thank you too, because it really was wonderful to see all of this. And Cathy, to see Tom again in his last days was very, very nice.
Yes, he was
very nice.
Thank you.
But Janine, thank you very much. I guess Bruce and Louis as well.
Thank you for helping us get some of this work done too. So thank you, everybody. We appreciate your being here, and you have our email, so you can always catch up with us if there's a question that comes to mind in the middle of the night. And if it's all right with everyone, we've made our time. We can bid each other adieu and carry on.
Thank you,
Cathy. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Take care. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.